Welcome to Digital Currents, brought to you by Morgan Creek Digital. I'm Xavier Segura. Each episode, we spotlight the topics and people changing the tech industry with a focus on AI, blockchain, chips, and big data. Thanks for listening, and please make sure to subscribe if you like what you hear. And remember, stay current.
Mark, happy Friday, and it looks like we are back on schedule.
In fact, so back on schedule. Even Tim, our beloved back scenes guy, was in Carolina blue today. Now yours is light blue, baby blue. Mine is Carolina blue. Tomorrow, big day, big dance. Playing at Cameron, so that University of New Jersey at Durham team. Although without Caleb Wilson, I'm feeling like it's going to be a little bit of a beatdown. No offense to the rest of the team.
They are a good team.
But, with Caleb, we obviously beat him the first time. And
right.
And look, the team has been playing well, and Seth Trimble is playing unbelievably well. But Boozer's pretty good. I mean, he's a pretty good player. So we'll see. It'll be fun, and it's always a great time of year. Carolina blue suits you better than me, but you're more handsome than I am. But it's a good color for us, and
it is. We like the color, and while I am not an alumnus there, I feel a kinship there, like few other places. I do have a light blue from Columbia, the other alma mater. But Mark, I can attest to you that Duke is the real deal. They beat us. They're a legitimate team. But this is what's great with our show. We're doing it every week, so you get to see so many different things of the year. I feel like I'm finally ready to think about basketball now. I was still in the football mode.
But look, it is truly March Madness time, and it is. It might be the best time of the year for sports. I mean, I love football. I love college football probably more than anything. But man, March Madness, just the tournament is so special. And the Cinderella stuff. So quick reveal, and then we'll talk about real stuff. So orange, I was going to break out the green pants for green candles, but I broke out the roller coaster sock game. We have been on this damn roller coaster for so long, and I think we're going to be on it for a while. But I was going to break out the spring green and getting close to St. Patty's Day, but I'll save them for next week. I'll wear the Kelly green pants next week, hoping for green candles. Now, we did have a few green candles this week. It was interesting, just double checking the actual number. I mean, it was actually a pretty big one. I mean, we went from 63 plus all the way to 73. I mean, that was a big move. We're still up 6% on the week, up, almost 7% for the month. So perhaps, we're at the bottom of that, drop, and we're about to lock into the track for a while and get pulled up. I think it's going to be more whoop-de-doos though. Some crazy stuff going on with the Department of War. And I mean, I don't even really want to talk about how crazy some of the stuff. And I hope it's.
Well, I'll tell you, Mark, that I'll tell you, I did something that I probably shouldn't have done, which is I went on a YouTube rabbit hole late one night, where I was, picking on different things. First, it's so funny in our industry, right? Because you start off with Bitcoin, you start off on markets, and then quickly you start navigating towards conspiracy theories in the Department of War. And it's funny how that algorithm works, Mark. So maybe yours was similar. And I had to pull myself up by the end because I was feeling pretty down. And it's fortunate that we got to Friday to be able to at least talk with one another and say, what has happened this week? Where are we going? And that roller coaster is a real vibe.
Well, there's just so many things. I mean, one, in theory, right, we shouldn't even be in a war because war has to be declared by Congress, not and then again, usually it's in defense of being attacked, and we weren't the classic. And look, I know she's just doing her job, but the I don't know what the right word is. The ridiculousness, right, of the press secretary saying, well, you know, the president had a feeling based on facts that the U.S. was going to be attacked. I'm like, well, but what facts? And a feeling isn't enough, right? I mean, in theory, there are rules for a reason, but I just find the whole thing kind of wild. And then, you know, and I'll pick on him because he seems a little unhinged to me, but you know, Hesketh, or however you pronounce his name, talking about, you know, raining down death on Tehran. I'm like, that's not a military target. That's like New York City. I mean, those are people. I mean, those are.
Yeah. Well said, Mark. And I guess our hearts and thoughts and go out to, you know, everybody who is in conflict right now, because, you know, you and I have been to those regions. We have walked in the rooms, not in Tehran itself, but certainly in the Middle East. And it is, you know, there are separate countries, separate societies, but it's very much a linked economy. And, you know, people are trying to get stuff done, whether they're from there or they're flying in from us, from Carolina or New Jersey. And, you know, they are just caught up in this culture right now. And so we hope that folks find their way towards resolutions, that cooler heads must prevail, hence the blue that we're wearing. And, you know, I had a call, you know, maybe to bring it forward here with some portfolio companies in that region. And so they're doing stable coins. We talk about stable coins all the time on the show, Mark. And so, you know, maybe there was this idea with crypto more broadly that, you know, why are we still doing this, right? Like, everything's going on in the world, everything's going on with the economy, finance, things are upside down. And why are we still doing this? Is there still value here? And so when I was on the call with this entrepreneur, you know, they're trying to create a neobank in Saudi that's also operating within the UAE and using stable coins because, you know, little fact, Saudi is the second largest renminbi market in the world, serving as a corridor towards Pakistan and India and real people making things, sending them out to other places. And so by building out these companies using this infrastructure, they can send more of that money back. And all they needed was a little bit of capital, a little bit of guidance, of which we can do. And so I was like, okay, we still matter. This is still important. Politics aside, nonsense aside, that it's something that's worth doing because the technology will create a creative value for people that really need this stuff. So that helped me.
Such an important point. And, you know, remittances in particular are such an important element of humanity because so many people I don't want to call them tiers because everyone aspires to be great, right? But just in terms of development and wealth, and so they're not, you know, the tippy top developed countries with incredible, you know, uniform wealth distribution, although there's very few of those. But generally speaking, there are people that have to migrate to find work, and they have to, you know, and they tend to migrate to these places with more development and more capital, whether it's the U.S. or Saudi, or whether it's the people in the Philippines that, you know, dominate the global travel industry, right? They're on boats and ships, and so they're gone, and they have to send money home. And in the current system, because of some silly rules on international payments, and because, you know, the monopolies basically skim as much as they want, it can be as much as 30 cents on the dollar gets skimmed into the current financial system. Like, that's a lot, you know? And the idea that with a stable coin, you could literally send that capital back to someone instantaneously, so no waiting time, for zero, now zero is the wrong number too. There needs to be some money made by the transmitting party, but it doesn't need to be 30. Right. And zero is wrong. So it is kind of heartening, but also heartbreaking. So it's heartening when you talk to the people, like you were saying, and whether it's the people you talk to in Latin America or South America or Central America or the Middle East or parts of Southeast Asia, that the average person, not because they don't care, but because they're busy with life, really. Most people have no idea that a country like the Philippines has so many people working outside and having to send. They hear about people in Mexico coming to the U.S. or people in El Salvador coming to the U.S. and sending money home, but this is all over the place. Or to your point, Pakistani, going to Saudi, right? I mean, that's a real cohort of people, and they need to help their families back home, and it is very heartwarming to help people build the systems to facilitate that. But it's heartbreaking, right? That we're still at a point where you got to have this kind of mass migration, and then there's the negativity around it, like don't come to my country, like the illegal element and deportations and all this stuff. I'm like, well, okay, but free and open markets work really effectively at this. And if there's a level of wage, and certain people say, well, that's not enough to get me off the couch to come do that job. Well, someone's got to do the job. Well, if there's somebody who lives in a place with a lower standard of living, says, geez, I would do that job. I would do that job all day, in fact. And so I know it's a big, complicated topic, but generally speaking, not that there aren't problems and not that there aren't negatives and not that there aren't individuals that do bad things, but generally speaking, this idea of free and open and a migration to where the work is and where the opportunity is a good thing. So.
Yeah, I'm glad you went there, Mark, because I know our show is about markets and about technology, but we have to react to markets in the way that markets react to events. And so there was one that I thought was pretty interesting. So I spoke with another investor, great investors also looking in the same regions that we are. And so we talk a lot about the Clarity Act, or the Not So Clear Act, which coined, which I know hilarious. And so I wanted to get your reaction on this, maybe on a slightly lighter note. So the idea is that, this could provide some of the borderline infrastructure to allow for stablecoins at companies that are being built overseas to ultimately help the US dollar, right? Because this is, mostly stablecoins denominated back in USD. So there was a report, Mark, and I know we will laud numbers that are just kind of thrown out there, but this was from JP Morgan, nonetheless. So specifically, one of the analysts there, that said, if there is passage of the Clarity Act, we could see Bitcoin, and they had this on record, at $266,000. And of course, Mark, there was no time given here. I'm not going to make it easy for you. They basically said it can go real high, and there was no time scale about when and where. But I think this is, it is a little clickbaity, but I think the idea is more that, there's still some big pieces of legislation that show where we are in the S curve, and we're not yet on that knee where we're on full mass adoption.
No, look,
what say you, Mark?
100%. And look, this is how the incumbents fight, right? They fight with regulation, both the absence of it, so there is no clarity, and I'll come back to that in a second, or with the presence of regulation to stifle competition. And so a couple of things about acts in the United States. If you read the name of the act, the reality is the exact opposite. So we can go to the Patriot Act. True. That had nothing to do with being a patriot. It was about surveilling and locking down and taking away rights and privileges. I mean, so you can go back through the history of these acts. The Genius Act had nothing to do with genius. it was about suppression of competition for the US dollar, right? That's what the Genius Act did. And to your point, so if you are Tether or US or Circle, you are a preferred provider of stablecoins because you denominate in US dollars. And then you had these other protocols trying to, glom on and say, but include us if we pay you a bunch of money, but your technology isn't useful. So but my point on this is the Clarity Act is it's the antithesis of what we need in the business to have it flourish, which is, we've talked about this, 2009, when Satoshi came along and created this incredible technology. And actually, it was a long time before that where it built up. It was released by Satoshi when it was. But decades of cypherpunks and a whole bunch of people contributing, people we know and people we've had on the show contributing. And so we get that. And from 2009 to 15, it was first they ignore you. Like, the world was like, nerds and geeks playing with your magic internet money. I thought about wearing the Bitcoin Wizard socks this morning, but I didn't. But magic internet money, whatever. Then they laugh at you. So 16 to 21, you guys are cute, playing with your little magic internet money. Oh, you built a lending company. Oh, $1 billion left the banking system. Ha ha ha. 10 billion? Now we got a freaking problem. So starting in 21, 22, it's the then they fight you phase. So they fight you with regulation. So they throw regulation at the lenders. Like, no, you told us the exact opposite a year ago. Oh, well, but we're changing the rules because we make the rules. And so that was one, is putting regulations in place, or just not saying anything. It's like paying taxes. How much do I owe you? Guess. I don't know, 10,000. Wrong. Go to jail. So it's like, if you know how much I owe you, just tell me and I will pay you. So if you tell me the regulations, then I can comply with them. The Winklevoss twins are like, right. Okay, what do I have to do? Oh, we're not going to tell you. So anything I do will be wrong? Yeah, that's kind of how it works. And so it's just like, I get it. And then they fight you phase, we're still in it. And the Clarity Act, Brian Armstrong 3 weeks ago in the Wall Street Journal, public enemy number one of Wall Street.
Yeah.
I'm like, really? Really? He's public? I mean, I can think of a lot of public enemies. I can think of a lot of people who've been trying to hack Wall Street for years, probably bigger enemies around the world than Brian Armstrong. But why is Brian so bad? It's because, to your point, if stablecoins were allowed to be what they are, which is an open and free market that's technologically superior to current systems, right? No 2-day settlement, instantaneous, 24/7, zero cost. And you could incent people by paying them a fair interest rate. Then, Jamie Dimon and Brian Moynihan were like, oh my God, $4 trillion would leave the banking industry. Yeah, that's how it works. If you rob your customers by holding their money and paying them no interest, and then you lend that money out at 4, 5, 6%, and you keep all the profits for yourself, the people who provide the capital might say, if you don't give me a share of the profits, I might go to a competing product. So they put this Clarity Act together and they said, nope, you guys, you upstarts, right? We don't know about you, and you can't do that. You can't compete with us. Like, well, why not? Well, you don't have to follow the same regulations as us and the same capital requirements. Well, it's because we don't rehypothecate. We're not doing fractional reserve lending. Fractional reserve lending is complicated, and there needs to be capital restrictions. And I'm a big fan of fractional reserve banking, but it's a different system than one-to-one fully backed collateralized lending. And just because I'm willing to pay someone interest to hold their capital, that's a good thing. That's the way it's supposed to work. And if I'm comfortable making 1% and you're making 5%, why is that wrong? Why should that be legislated to be illegal? Yeah, again, I'll open up a wound here, but it's kind of like minimum wage. Price fixing. Price fixing is never a good idea. If someone wants to work for less, that's how markets work. And so, but that's not a living wage. I'm like, well, that's your definition of living. If that person feels like they can live on that, I mean, so it's all, yeah.
Well, a lot there, Mark. And I think in particular on the idea of, regulation, and we've mentioned this before, this theme on the show of, there on the one side is totally decentralized. And on the other side is kind of our traditional system as we know it today. And as more of these crypto DeFi products become available in the mass market, as banks must create financial products to exist, where is the middle ground? There was one kind of small news tidbit that I think can segue us in that direction, is that, U.S. regulators now are treating tokenized securities the same as traditional ones for bank capital requirements, which I thought was kind of interesting, because the idea here is that if we're all going to go to tokenized securities, shout out to Figure for leading the charge there. What does that mean for some of the existing, regulations in place? Yep. And so now this has been firmly established here that, this is tokenized securities, including derivatives, referencing as identical to their conventional counterparts. They are subject to the same collateral requirements as you would expect
in
the conventional market.
Because this is what's so strange. And it's not strange, right? The existing monopolies and duopolies and oligopolies really like that status. So if you can be DTCC, and you can hold all these physical pieces of paper and issue these little, alphanumeric QSIPs, and then take a skim off all the transactions, that's a really nice place to be. And so to tokenize it, all tokenization is making an entry on a ledger that's decentralized instead of centralized. There's a ledger inside DTCC, happens to be made of paper and maybe some electrons, but it's not permanent and immutable and independent and fully audited, every so many minutes. And it's just the point about Bitcoin. Why would Bitcoin go up so much? Well, when you have an acknowledgement through legal clarity or regulatory clarity that this asset, this technology is superior, right? If it's just simple, like if I lend money and I have the only ledger, then everyone is reliant on me to be honest and fair in making sure the ledger stays the same. But if I want to cheat, I can cheat because I have the only ledger. So dual entry accounting gets created to stop that. But with dual entry accounting, you still have two ledgers, but who's going to decide which one is right? So you need a referee. Well, if the referee happens to be human, happens to be a bank, that's what banking basically is, it turns out humans are fallible, right? They can be incentivized to cheat or steal and again, I'm not accusing anybody of anything other than facts, right? JP Morgan has paid $40 billion in fines over the last couple of decades. Okay, paid. That's not what they've been accused of. That's what they've actually paid for violations of rules related to making sure that the ledgers match. Oh, okay. Humans are fallible, bad people, and they got fired. And most of the people at JP Morgan are good people, probably absolutely true. But the referee can be fallible. In the world of blockchain, this is the mind-numbingly beautiful and mind-blowingly incredible innovation here. If we have this ledger that can't be controlled by any one person, can't be changed by any one person, can't be manipulated and actually acts as a fair referee of this transaction, the whole world shifts. And so that every asset is just an entry in this perfect ledger. And that's what Figure is creating in terms of the open, right, network. And yeah, if you're the monopoly that's about to be replaced, you're going to make up stuff to discredit this new technology. And you're going to try to use regulatory capture to limit how much money moves into that new thing, or you're going to try to dislevel the playing field. I get it. And that's been the case every time new technology comes in. And we've talked about this ad nauseum, but I think we are at this amazing inflection point where the world is a better place when there's truth instead of trust. Because we've found out that not everybody's trustworthy all the time. And sometimes people do things where you don't really understand what the underlying incentive is. But like, why is there a war going on in the Middle East right now? I mean, is it about natural resources and oil? Is it about money? Is it about telecommunications? Is it about, what is it about? There's at the root, there's always a cause. Tends to be natural resources related, which is kind of bizarre. But
Mark, I saw something in the morning and it made me think about you and knowing that you would chuckle about this. And consider the source. Okay, so I'm just going to put it out there, but it was coming from the Mooch. It's coming from
my frenemy.
And so, yeah, exactly. So he has this idea, and it wasn't his idea. He's parroting it, but it seemed kind of interesting. And he was talking about our history as a nation, kind of coming out of Declaration of Independence, and basically looking at these roughly 80-year periods of inflection point, which correspond with big changes. So first, birth of the nation, right? It speaks for itself. In the next 80 years, Civil War kind of also speaks for itself. Then the next 80 years, the Great Depression, and kind of the formation of what became the American century, which is kind of where we're at now at this next point of 80 or so years, which speaks to a lot of the things that you're mentioning about, like the lack of remembering history, immutability, fungibility. And so, as far as the why now, maybe the Mooch is onto something here about cyclicality, and just also 80 years, also like an average human lifespan, although it was less in 1776. But generally speaking, this idea that, things change over time, they're multifaceted issues, but maybe one thing to kind of pull the thread on about regulation, this one might have gone under the radar, but it's part of a broader story, Mark, is this idea that, you've seen what's been happening with SEC charges lately. They've been getting dropped left and right. And there's one that also got dismissed against the Tron entities, against Justin Sun.
Yeah.
So they just ended in a settlement, $10 million to walk away. And I think, they're avoiding any, criminal charges, just kind of a civil case. But the original case also included allegations of wash trading to manipulate prices and like promotional campaigns with like Lindsay Lohan and Jake Paul. Exactly. So, I think this is kind of an interesting thing where, the world is complex. On the one hand, there will be scams in crypto, no doubt about it. But on the other hand, scams are going to happen regardless of if it's crypto or if it's regardless if it's other,
money. This is not new, right? When money's involved, eventually unscrupulous players will migrate to whatever system is dominant, and they will find a way to profit. From coin clipping in ancient times to bucket shops, in the roaring 20s, to ICO scams. It has nothing to do with the technology itself. It has to do with the human nature. Like I said, at some point, some humans tend to not pay attention to ethical rules and codes. I mean, look, my wife's family's from, Oklahoma. The Sooners. Well, what is a Sooner? That's someone who broke the rules and went out to claim their spot of land before you were supposed to. Okay. I mean, now, were those people really horrible human beings? They were just trying to provide for their family and make a good life? No. But breaking the rules and trying to enrich yourself, it's a story as old as time. And it's kind of like when FTX happened and they're like, oh, that's a crypto problem. Like, no, that's a bad guy doing bad things problem. I mean, that's again, a story as old as time. And we can go back to the the savings and loan, Charles Keating, bad guy doing bad things, had nothing to do with savings and loans being bad. We can go back to Knickerbocker Panic, had nothing to do with Knickerbocker Trust. It had to do with, again, JP Morgan spreading vicious rumors to get rid of his competition. So, I mean,
tale as old as time.
Yeah, tale as old as time.
You're right. Tale as old as time. And maybe kind of moving off of that issue and maybe going someplace a little bit different. Mark, I wanted to sing some praises for Quantum and our friends over at Pascal. So they have made some announcements here that they are going public via SPAC at a $2 billion valuation. And so what this is pretty interesting with is, number one, SPACs are back. For whatever people think about. They're just providing people a way towards realizing an exit event. And I think at the minimum standard, it should be, how does this company operate? If it's just a cash grab, of course they're going to fail, whether it's an IPO or a SPAC. So structure aside, this company is outperforming its peers in the publicly traded space that are ridiculously high multiples. I'm pretty excited about this one, Mark. I know you are as well. And they were actually founded by the Nobel laureate for quantum computing in 2019. So they clearly have like the right, stuff from the tech standpoint, and they're already making good progress towards this. And this was one that we kind of had some debate upon internally about, how ready are we with quantum? Is it going to be a thing? Very similar to many years ago about, is Bitcoin going to be a real thing? Not that the two are equivalent, but new technology.
They're technologically equivalent in the sense that they are evolving technologies that don't just, you don't snap your fingers and you're done, right? Yes, you can snap your fingers and you turn on Bitcoin for the first time, but then it has to be adopted, right? And used and proved that it could work, pizza guy. And so there's an S curve, right? There's some early adopters and then there's the majority, and same thing with quantum. I mean, the fact that you can create a qubit, that's, well, what's a qubit, right? Reminds me of the old Monty Python skit. What's qubit? Or cubic. What's a qubit? So binary, 0, 1, off or on, light or dark, whatever you want to, just antithesis. No. There's a quantum realm where you can be in multiple states at the same time. Kind of breaks my brain a little bit, but okay. And okay, so you can isolate this quantum state, this atomic state, and then you can harness that to do computation better, faster, cheaper. Okay, that's again breaking my brain, but this guy won a Nobel Prize for it. But it's kind of hard to make qubits, and you need a bunch of them to make it work. Because one of the problems with quantum is, if I have a binary state and I ask it a question, yes or no, it's pretty good at that answer, right? Yes, no, black, white. If I ask a multiple state system a yes or no, like what's 2 + 2, most of the time it'll answer 4, but occasionally it might not. So that's the error rate. And if that error rate's too high, then a computer is less valuable. Now, it could do other things really, really well where you don't need perfect accuracy, you just need speed. But long story short, the more qubits you have, the lower that error rate can be, and you can get to a point where it's it's acceptable. In fact, there's somebody even recently, I wish I could give them credit, but they're saying, oh no, what we're going to do is we're going to have a quantum computer and a supercomputer, and the supercomputer will just correct the errors and feed in. So, okay, that seems like duplicative, but okay. But my point here is that there have been a lot of technological challenges to get enough qubits to make quantum possible, but innovators around the world, some in China, some in France, like Pascal and others, have found ways to do it. Well, first, it had to be at minus 470 degrees Kelvin, which just sounds really expensive to me. Then you could do it at room temperature, but then you need these super high power lasers, and you need to like literally be able to pick single atoms. Geniuses figured that out, and now we've got these, numbers of qubits. And the best part is people will actually pay real money for processes and systems that have some value. Like proving the concept, that's just R&D, right? Government's got to fund that, research got to fund that, and it looks nice, and you can clap and say that's great. It's kind of like nuclear fusion. Yeah, I mean, people talk about it, and we see plasma and all that, but still, we don't have, the Mr. Fusion, right, on the back of the car, like from Back to the Future. So anyway,
there's no flux capacitor yet.
No flux capacitor. That's it. We just need the flux capacitor.
Yeah, no, I think that it's one of those things where it's signaling a little bit of a shift. A lot of these companies have been operating in the public sphere for a while. Their multiples were trading super high, but they weren't really quantifiable, if you catch my pun there. It was very quantum light. So now with Pascal, it shows that innovation could really kind of cross that chasm and maybe bring in a new age. And speaking of that new age, NVIDIA, which is, thought of as one of the most innovative companies. There are two NVIDIA stories, Mark, that I want to get your thoughts on, a bonus here. On the one hand, there has been a slight signal. I'm not sure if you're buying this signal, but a signaling nonetheless, from Mr. Leather Jacket Jensen, to basically pull back a little bit of their recent investments in the large AI companies like OpenAI and Anthropic, citing that it will likely be the last. And then that gives questions about, well, don't these investors tend to come in at the IPO and kind of helping prop up that final boost? What happens there? So that was not available for further comment on Jensen's comment. But then the twofer here is that on the heels of that, NVIDIA also is investing $4 billion in photonics to power the next gen AI data centers. And Mark, I'll make it a 3P because the trilogies are always, the good things come in threes.
That's right.
Which is when we think about the impacts of what's happening in the world now with energy. And I love how we cover all these topics so we can pull on these examples. If we think about, the transfer of energy, I think now the rubber is starting to hit the road a little bit, where people are realizing you can't just continue expanding up and up and up. Innovation has to come in, as you said many times, to maybe, sidestep those, what look like linear growth models on our power grid. And so the idea is that, photonics could help that with reducing that cost using you're basically using light lasers to do that, as opposed to the conventional kind of data centers. When you're thinking about this, and NVIDIA, still being the top dog, and with all that's happening in the world and where energy comes from, what's some reactions here? It's a whopper, it's a trilogy, but curious, any thoughts?
Oh man, so many thoughts, right? I mean, a couple things are happening, and we knew these were going to happen, and it's kind of funny to see them actually happening in real time, which is to the point of linear extrapolation. It's easy, right? That's what humans like to do, and it makes sense, right? I mean, one, we're generally optimistic, right? We hope for better tomorrow, and we make we value positive energy over negative energy, but linear extrapolation is easy. Like if it's sunny outside, oh, it's gonna be sunny. because I can't really see the clouds on the horizon that are coming this way. Now with the models and monitoring and radar, sometimes they get it right, but a lot of times, the best weather is just look outside, right? Weather forecasters notoriously not right. So same thing here is the linear forecast of, oh, well, if using GPUs is better than CPUs, right? Because CPUs process words, GPUs process images, pictures worth 1,000 words, chart of the day, all that good stuff. Okay, so it's better. Okay, great. Well, if one GPU is good, then two must be better. Okay, great. So we'll pack them together. If we put a lot of GPUs in a cluster, now we need a lot of stuff. We need a lot of data centers and cables, and oh my God, now we need a lot of power. Oh, and now we need to build 42 nuclear power plants. Okay, great. But what if we did some other innovation, either software or different kind of interconnects like photonics instead of copper wires? What if we did some of that? And DeepSeek was a perfect example of that. DeepSeek's like, well, I can't get more GPUs, so I'll just write some better software and I'll make a system that actually leapfrogged. And so it seems logical that each innovation will change the direction of that linearity of demand. And for me, the bigger thing was this little company in Toronto that released the first LLM on a chip. Now, it's not the best LLM, but it's good enough for most. And all this is coming down to saying, if I can put an LLM directly on the chip, I get rid of heat and problems, and I don't have to go to the data center, so I don't need a lot of internet, I don't need a lot of power. Okay, that's interesting. So then what does Jensen do? He's like, well, maybe I better buy this company that makes LPUs, language processing units, which is a derivative of TPUs, co-inventor of TPUs at Google. And then Gemini trains their latest model using only TPUs, no GPUs. So Jensen's got to be like, oh, geez, that's bad. I thought I was going to sell Google a lot of GPUs. Well, so now maybe I need to not commit capital to these big data centers like OpenAI and Anthropic, because what if I could get an open source model and put it on a home computer or even my phone, and then I don't need the data center at all? Well, that's kind of what happened. So now Qwen, Alibaba, releases 4 models, one small enough. Now it's only 800,000 parameters. I can't remember. It's 0.8 something. 0.8. Yeah, it's 0.8. So it's 800 million parameters. 800 million. So 0.8 billion parameters. But it literally will run on your phone. So there are people running on their iPhone. I think you have to have the 617 because I have enough memory, but it's run on your phone. But more importantly, there's been this rush to buy Mac Minis and Mac Studios to run these Qwen models that can get up as high as 4 billion parameters locally. So I don't need any data center. I don't need to pay any subscriptions. Well, now what's interesting, and Apple was the only one of the mags that didn't spend hundreds of billions of dollars to build big data centers. You had Amazon and Microsoft and all, all these people spending all this CapEx, right? Buying all from NVIDIA. And Apple quietly just said, you know what? We have our own silicon, and we get the M4, and maybe we can get the M5, and we can get the M4 Pro and the M5 Max. And now they just released their own silicon, right? So didn't spend any CapEx on, data centers. And now I can go buy one of these little Mac Studios or Mac Minis for, sub $3,000. and I can run the most powerful model in the world until DeepSeek 4 comes out, which is anytime now, locally. And here's where it gets really interesting. So I, like a whole bunch of other people, last week deleted ChatGPT, completely erased it, all traces gone from my phone, canceled my account, deleted my data. I did download a copy of the data just in case, but all of it gone. Why did I do that? Well, because they cut a deal with the devil and said, no, government, do whatever you want with it and use it for surveillance. Now I know I'm being surveilled by this and we're being surveilled. I know that.
After our show, Mark, we'll get a little ad of something we spoke about. Ocean. Well, yes, you're correct.
And so I know I'm being surveilled by other stuff too, but just the blatant disregard for privacy just seemed bad to me. So now maybe Anthropic's just as bad. And I don't use Claude either, but I use the Chinese models. And people, oh, you're giving all your data to China. China doesn't care about my data. Trust me. So here's the thing. All of this is going to a point where, we know that this uses 20 watts, doesn't use a nuclear power plant, runs 24/7. And the best models today, I'm going to get these numbers wrong, but it's like, 20 billion operations per second or something like but the order of magnitude is, it's like 200 trillion synapses per second in your brain. So it's 100x bigger, better, faster, 20 watts. So we're not there. And the biological systems are still better than silicon. But it doesn't mean silicon's bad. And it doesn't mean the tools aren't good or useful. It's just, we might be going a different direction. And maybe Jensen has figured this out, and probably has. And doesn't mean that no one's going to buy GPUs. And it doesn't mean you should short NVIDIA stock. But what it probably means is other models like Apple, and maybe you should buy Apple stock. That one actually might be an interesting play. But we're going to live in a world where the tools, right? As we talk about this, data is the base layer, right? That's where all the action is. And that's what the most important element is. And then you need blockchains to organize and store the data. You need processors, chips to process the data. And then AIs are just tools to make decisions with data. And we want our tools to be where we work, on our laptop, on our phone, in our home, on little Mac Mini or whatever. So long answer to say, I think the vision that we're all going to be entirely dependent on these big data centers, people call them digital gulags and prisons. Maybe that's why they're building them, right? Maybe they think they can enslave the population. It's kind of like we talked about this one other time. So there's this show on TV called Mythic Games or something like that. And it was basically like a series about a gaming studio. And there was this problem where a bunch of supremacists were, coming in and it was a multiplayer game and they were beating up all the other players. And so this guy said, well, here's an interesting thing. So he created an event that was fake, saying all the weak players were going to be here. And so all the supremacists showed up with their, player, their animorphs or whatever. And then they flicked the switch and they locked them into a single server. So you see this giant server farm in this one server. He says, all right, they can play with themselves, forever in this one server. So hopefully we don't all get locked in a server somewhere, but my guess is the opposite will happen. We'll be freed from the giant data centers. And then one last thing, and again, I don't want to talk about the war too much, but one missile into one of the giant data centers in the Middle East right now would be very deleterious to a lot of things. Because what people don't realize is how much of data center traffic, because of how much money Saudi and others spent to try to diversify their economies, that could be a problem. So we hope that doesn't happen.
We hope that doesn't happen. And in lieu of the chart of the week, there was something that we didn't get to touch on earlier today that I think it's worth discussing and bringing back. We could have easily done this in the chart format, but we're running a little tight on time, so we'll just kind of talk through it, Mark. The labor numbers and job reports just came out. And Mark, I love this quote by Mr. Mark Hamrick, who was one of the financial analysts at Bankrate. Well, that was ugly. So that's kind of like, so says it all. What was ugly about it? Well, Mark, I'm sure you've seen it. If you haven't already, is that the U.S. shed 92,000 jobs in February, and the previous months of job growth were not as strong as previously reported. I think this is the troubling bit. And you, in your Sinister Saturday ways, forecasted this. Because when I reported the numbers, I said, Mark, things are looking good. And you said, well, not so fast, my friend. Those things get revised all the time. I said, Mark, maybe they won't this time. Hope springs eternal, because check this out. In January, the numbers were cut back from, I believe, 130,000 to 126,000. But then in December, this is the bruiser. They were cut from 50,000 jobs added to just 17,000 jobs. And then that has big implications for 2025. Because it was the first year to record 5 months of labor market contractions since 2010, when we were recovering from the global financial market. So Mark Hamrick was right. That was ugly.
That was ugly. And look, we know that the jobs numbers are going to be ugly, right? Because despite what NBER says, we're in a form of a recession. Now, it feels like that 2001 recession where the economy was still growing at 1%, but 1% is sub the 2+% you need to have real growth. And, fourth quarter GDP came in super light. And so the whole year GDP came in just barely over 2, which is not stall speed, but it's less good. And half of that was just the data center spending. So really, without the data center spending, which benefits a small number of jobs and people, the economy really is kind of in that recession. And the K-shape, right? The people at the top feel great. Yeah. Luxury stuff is doing great. But the people at the bottom, I mean, it is hard. And so that isn't surprising. And then on top of it, you've got all of the accumulated excess. I'm going to pick on Block. I'm going to pick on Jack, right? So Jack sent this tweet out, which I thought was an interesting way to fire half your people. So he sends this tweet out.
It might have been an AI tweet. We didn't confirm that. It might have been sent out by agentic AI.
There you go. So sends out this tweet basically saying you're going to get an email in the morning. You're either in or you're out. And not going to tell you which, but hey, good luck to you in the morning. And if you're out, you're going to get a nice severance and it's going to be okay. We still love you and we won't kick you out tomorrow. You'll have at least until, I think it was on a Tuesday, so you'll have until Thursday. I'm like, wow, God. So nice. But I guess sometimes you get locked out immediately and you can't even get your email. So, but long story short is he blamed it on AI, right?
Yeah.
And I loved it because at least a handful of people from inside said, bullshit. This is just profligate growth, right? And irresponsible growth over the last few years, bad execution. They didn't deliver on their ASIC. They didn't expand their business into the areas they said they were going to. This is a company that in September, October, I don't remember, it doesn't matter what month, had an all hands meeting in Austin, Texas. They flew in 8,000 people of the 12, $68 million they spent. That's $8,500 per person. Ask me if I want to go to a party or have $8,500. I'm taking the $8,500. I'm sure it was a good party, but they had Jay-Z and Soulja Boy. That's not a company that's in desperate straits, that needs to cut half its workforce. This is simply, hey, we overhired and yeah, maybe we didn't execute very well. So this is, again, tales old as time. Tech companies, boom, bust, boom, bust. That's why you have recessions. And we can say there's no recession, but when you look at the jobs numbers, they're ugly.
Yeah. So Mark was correct. Again, well, that was ugly. Mark Hamrick. And then we'll probably end on that note, a not so optimistic one, but a realistic one. In that, sometimes we have to call the balls and strikes. We want to be mindful of what's happening in the world, which is why we spend time talking about it, because it impacts us every single day as investors and also as human beings.
But let's end optimistically, right? Yes. Every technology that has ever come along has erased jobs. Every single one. We have more jobs today than any time in human history. We'll have more jobs tomorrow because we count the job losses, but what we don't seem to count very well is the new creation of jobs, the new industries, the new livelihoods, the new futures. And yeah, there's a transition, and yeah, there can be some difficult, and when you get laid off, it sucks. I mean, and you do have to reinvent, but the future will be brighter. It will, because the technology makes it bright. Now, can bad things happen? Can people do stupid stuff? Yeah, of course. But that's a risk always. But I'm going to bet on the positive. I'm going to bet that we find ways to use these tools to enhance the greatest asset in the world, which is human creativity. Full stop.
I love that. Mark, bringing us positive. I must confess, I have probably the negative one over the last couple of weeks. When we entered this industry studies, we'll try to rebound and recover next week. And we'll try to thank all our listeners for tuning in. We know that you guys depend upon us to kind of let you know what's going on and the thoughts about how to react to this market news. So please continue to rate, review, subscribe. And as always, stay current.
Thank you for joining us this week on Digital Currents. Check out our links to our website and social media in the show's description box. Please make sure to subscribe if you like what you hear. And remember, stay current.
This podcast should not be construed as investment advice nor solicitation for the sale of any security, advisory, or other service. Investment themes and ideas discussed may be owned by funds managed by the host and podcast guests. Any conflicts at the time of production have been mentioned by the host but are subject to change. Listeners should consult their personal financial advisors before making any investment decisions.